Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Fitzgerald. I'm from readinggroupguides.com, a website from the Book Report Network, and the host of the Book Reporter Talks to Video podcast series, which now has more than 150 author interviews and is available on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We are so excited about this evening, where we are going to welcome to Bookaccino live book group event, where our guest is Nita Prose. And we are going to be discussing her debut novel, The Maid. This is a New York Times bestseller in both hardcover and paperback. Came out just a couple of weeks ago in paperback. It's a Good Morning America Book Club selection, the Goodreads winner for the Best Mystery Suspense title of 2022, and a 2022 Book Reporter Bets On selection. And now it's also an Edgar Award nominee. Our book reporter reviewer, Kayla Provencher, had this to say about The Maid. This is a debut novel with sheets that are spotless of errors and folded together just right. Upon finishing the book, anticipate checking dark corners for strangers and your pages for unseemly dog-eared creases. That's fun, right? So let me talk to you about what we're going to do for the format tonight. The format's going to be as follows. Let me start by noting that we think that everyone has read the book, and we're going to be discussing all spoilers. We're just going to assume that this is not the kind of book where we're just coming for the wine. I will begin with the discussion with Nita, and then a couple of members of the audience will be joining us live to share their questions. And I also have at least a half dozen questions from readers who are camera shy that I'm going to jump on and do their questions for them. And then we're going to take questions from the audience from the Q&A. So as the evening goes on, please drop your questions into the Q&A down below, which will be shared only with the panelists. And we'll be looking at that chat, not looking in the chat for questions, but rather in Q&A. So that's the place. Chat is where to talk amongst yourselves and talk about where you're from, talk about why you love this book, anything that way. But if you have a question, it goes into the Q&A. And with that housekeeping behind us, let's welcome Nita to the stage. Nita and I have spoken together before, just so you know. We were, I interviewed her for Book Reporter Talks to way back when the book came out. And I also was lucky enough to interview at the Morristown Festival of Books. So we've even done an event in person, which seems like kind of uncanny these days. They've actually met people instead of just being on the screen. And she's ever been as lovely in person. And we had just had such a good time. We were on the altar.
The same to you, Carol. You're the absolute best.
So much fun. We were sitting on the altar of a church. It was really quite wonderful, really quite wonderful. So Nita, it's great to see you again. Let's start by you telling us the story of what inspired you to write The Maid, because I love this story.
Well, my full-time job is as an editor, and I didn't, like a lot of people do, decide to write this novel. It hit me like a lightning bolt. And, it was a few years ago, it was 2019, and I was in London at the book fair. So every year in London, there's a big book fair, and agents and publishers and writers gather, and we talk about books and we discuss manuscripts, and we all get excited. Anyhow, I was in London and I was staying at a hotel there, and I left to go to a business meeting, and I came back around 10 a.m. and I opened the door to my hotel room, and I completely surprised the maid who was cleaning it. And I remember her sort of, jumping back into a shadowy corner. And the truly embarrassing part, Carol, as you know, because I've told you this before, she had in her hands my track pants, which were sweaty, turned inside out, and absolutely disgusting. And I'd left them on my bed. So when she was trying to clean up my room and make the bed, she had them in her hands. And so I walk in and she's shocked and I'm shocked. And I look at her and I think, oh my goodness, what an intimate and invisible job it is to be a roommate. She'd been cleaning my room for days. She knew everything about me, Carol. She knew everything. Okay. I knew nothing about her though. Mm-hmm. And, it was just one of those things that kind of stuck in, the kind of thing that just sticks in the back of your mind. So I didn't think about it, but a few days later, I was on my plane ride home. And that's where I started to hear, and this is so woo-woo, but it's true. I started to hear this voice, and it was not my voice. It was clean. It was crisp. It was polished and precise. It did not sound like me at all. And I just listened to it. And then I grabbed a pen, and I didn't have any paper. So I grabbed the napkin from under my drink, and I started to write what I was hearing. And that turned out to be the prologue for this very book. And even then I didn't realize it, but that is exactly the moment when I began my debut novel.
See, if you didn't have those track pants sitting on the floor, we would not have this book today. I mean, I've joked that I am very neat in a hotel the first 2 days, and then all bets are off. The shoes are
This is the same with me. So I was on like day 4 by this point. I was a hot mess. There were papers everywhere. There were books everywhere because of the book fair, clothes. It was just a disaster. And I really felt bad. And I will say that if anything, attuning myself to what it is to be a roommate has made me much more careful and respectful now when I'm staying at a hotel.
That's exactly, because you think like, she even knows I didn't put the cap on the toothpaste. I squeeze it in the middle, all these kinds of things. And you know absolutely nothing about this person. And usually they say hello to you in the hallway, but they don't know exactly what room you're in. And they have all those really great things on the cart that you want to take. Like, oh, I'll take a little like extra tissues or something.
Exactly.
Debbie Moore is going to join us right now. Debbie's from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, or she's there now. She's usually in Syracuse, and she's been with us on many of these book group gatherings. So I'm going to have her jump on, and she has some questions for you. And they're always really good questions. So as soon as she comes on board, camera's on. That's difficult. Like it's not the Today Show. Let's put it that way. Find the person and turn on their camera. So let's see where we are with that. But it was funny because we were talking about the anonymity of so many people that are helping you out when you go places that you just don't look at these people. You just don't pay attention to them. And as you go on, but yet they're very important people into what's happening into the hotel at that point. So I don't know. That's what we're sitting and looking for. Well, while we're waiting for Debbie, I can jump on with a question that was submitted by Valerie Kelberg. She says that Molly has a unique personality and characteristics. How did you develop her character, and from where did you pull those characteristics? I see from experience. Is that where it came from?
That was sort of a gift, I must say. Her voice was so crystal clear to me, and that was sort of a gift from the gods that it came to me quite like that. But I would say that only when I was finished writing the book did I really understand some of the underlying influences that I wasn't conscious of while I was writing. And one of them was the fact that many years ago, before I worked in the publishing industry and was an editor, I taught kids with special needs. They were teenagers. And it was a formative time. They were so wonderful and so challenging, Carol. And I loved them dearly. I don't know if they loved me, but I'm not sure the feeling was always mutual, but whatever. They were the most amazing kids. And, one of the things I like to do is take them out of the classroom, just get them out in the world. And, it was a powerful thing to be just at a donut shop or to the post office, or just do things and have them exist, have them take up space. And most people were lovely to these kids, except for the people who weren't, and who treated them with a kind of casual cruelty sometimes that I will never forget. It marked me. It really did. And, when I came to write Molly, this character who is unique, who struggles with social cues, who tries her best to organize the world according to justice and cleanliness and right. But, the world isn't so neat all the time and doesn't quite want to be categorized as such. Anyhow, I felt like I put all of these characteristics that were some of the best characteristics of my students into Molly as a kind of tribute to them.
Oh, how lovely. Really, really, really lovely. Here's Debbie, who's joining us from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Debbie is a frequent questioner at these events, and she's always got such good questions. So Debbie, let's have you chime in now.
Hi, Nita. I really loved your book. I loved Molly. You've kind of answered 2 questions about how you came up with the idea for the story, but how did you put together the plot? I mean, did you decide it was going to be a mystery from the very beginning? And how did Molly's uniqueness fit into that story that you were trying to tell?
Right. Well, I knew that I wanted this to be both a mystery, but a very first person driven point of view story as well. In some ways, this is a whodunit, but in other ways, it's something else entirely different. The whodunit is a kind of trick. You know, sure, I want you to be asking yourself, is it Rodney in the restaurant with a poison drink, or is it the maid with a pillow in room 301? Sure, I want you to be asking that. But at the same time, something more fundamentally important for me was to have the reader step into Molly's experience, to see from behind her eyes, to live as her in a unique headspace, and to also try to grapple with the very difficult experience of being a hotel room maid, which by definition means you exist in plain sight, but you are treated like a pariah and you're basically invisible because you're going from room to room cleaning other people's dirt that none of us, as those hierarchied guests at the top of the pyramid in a fancy hotel, ever want to think too much about. So, you know, in terms of how I plotted, you know, I think there's sort of two schools of thought for most authors. There's the pantsers, the ones who fly by the seat of their pants, and they just sit in front of the computer and they type and go wherever, you know, it takes them. I am not one of those, Debbie. I am so not one of those. I'm much closer to Molly in that respect. Okay. I'm a little bit organized. So I definitely had a plan. I knew from the get-go that this was a mystery, and you know, because of the way this idea struck me, that too was a gift. You know, a hotel and a maid and someone dead. Right away, I knew, okay, I know we are in a very classic Agatha Christie style traditional mystery world, but because I'm a freak, because I can never do something that is straight on, I always have to challenge the boundaries. It's how I'm made. Sorry, Mom. You know, I wanted to Frankenstein this book into being one thing and another thing. I wanted it to have that classic mystery feel, but on the other hand, I wanted it to be a journey of the spirit, so that on the one hand, we solve a mystery, but on the other, this is a journey of growth that takes us through grief, trauma, a brutal experience of somebody who has experienced a lack of belonging and being shunned by the world around her, by the social world, being treated unfairly. And she goes through a period of growth in a very, very short time that leaves her in a different spot, a better spot by the end of the book than at the beginning. And I don't know about you, but these days, hope is something I find in short supply in the real world. And, you know, as a gift to myself and to readers, I wanted to offer you that by the end of the novel.
Is there anything in particular about Molly and her uniqueness that you wanted people to take away from your story?
You know, one thing I never wanted was for her to be labeled, you know, and that's sometimes a question. I love the way you're phrasing this because it's so graceful, Debbie. It's so very graceful. So I appreciate that very much. I did not want to say she is this kind of person. She is that kind of person. Here is her diagnosis from the DSM manual. You know, that for me was terribly uninteresting for many reasons. Most of all, because nobody is one thing. Nobody should be reduced to a label or to a diagnosis, because every human being on earth is so much more complicated and rich than that. And I worried if I said too much about the point of view you were entering, that readers would say, oh, that's not me. I am not that. But this is a book about what it means to be the same and different at the same time. Molly is different. And yet, the most important part for readers to take away is that she is the same as all of us, and she deserves dignity and respect like all of us.
Mm-hmm. So
Thanks,
well,
Nita. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Debbie.
Really, really so well said, because, you know, I think that so many times we see people when we're in a hotel, when we're any place, we're even at the food store. I remember walking out of the grocery store the other day and I was saying goodbye. And the person said, you're the only person that said goodbye today. And I said, this is really interesting. Or thank you. And how many people never say goodbye? They never say thank you. They never, I mean, if you're the least bit gracious someplace, where it will get you, like where it, and I think that people, when they're in, especially a hotel, I think that people don't realize is there's a whole behind the scenes group. And there's a whole hierarchy behind the hotel that whoever this maid is coming into your room is dealing with all day long, besides dealing with the world over here. And I think you do such a good job of bringing us behind the hotel. I was thinking like in the Lotus, a White Lotus, like you're behind the scenes and you're in front of the scenes of what's going on. And I think it's just a very, very interesting perspective that we get on everything that's going, on at the hotel. And you ask for a room change or something, you got to be really sweet. And sometimes you get the really good room, that's it.
That's a good tip, Carol. I'm going to remember that.
Let's remember that one. Debbie, so thank you for joining us again. You're always bring us such good questions.
Thanks.
And now I'm going to see if we can bring on Donna Barton. Okay, let me see if we can. I'm hearing Greg, but I'm not seeing. Okay, let's see. There
Donna.
she
is.
There's Donna. Okay, so. Okay, wait a second.
Hey, Nita.
Hey, Donna.
I really enjoyed the book. I'm not really a mystery person, but it got such good reviews. I wanted to see what all the hoopla was about. And I love reading books about people who are a little different. And so Debbie kind of asked my question. One of my questions is why you didn't specifically name Molly as someone on the autism spectrum. So you've kind of answered that already. But I also felt it kind of odd that the people around her seemed to be oblivious of that as well. And it seems like something that most people would know about.
I wish that were true, but my experience in the real world was anything but that. I talked a little bit before about, taking teenage kids out into the wilderness of an urban center and experiencing that blatant casual cruelty. Just from somebody being marginally slightly outside of the boundaries of what is so-called expected in human interactions, and stepping outside of a code. And I also feel that all around us, when we start to look with care, when we start to see other people with great care, there are more differences and more social cues that are different than we ever want to actually admit. And I sometimes wonder if us so-called normative people, maybe I shouldn't count myself on the normative scale actually, but I will for the purposes of this, sometimes are the most rigid. And if those outside of those norms actually have the liberty of greater creative thought, greater compassion and empathy, and understanding that we don't all fit into such narrow boxes, and neither do our social cues.
I love how you really emphasized how she was deeply hurt and humiliated, and her desire for friendship and romance. And I just love that.
Thank
I also wonder if did you use a sensitivity reader after you had done your draft, and what kind of feedback did you get?
I absolutely did. I had two sensitivity readers, one because Juan Manuel was a Latin character, and I certainly wanted to get that right. And so it was from that point of view. And another one from a woman who was autistic and worked with autistic people. And she read it as well. And I just wanted to make sure that Molly's personality was in no way offensive, and that I had done what I tried to do, I think that you're responding to, which was make her a real and true human being with that whole range of emotions that any human being on earth is going to have, and to portray that with some grace and dignity. And their feedback was very, very subtle. In a couple of cases with Juan Manuel, I had to be very careful to make sure that he had agency, make sure that it wasn't everybody else around him solving problems for him. And the same was true with Molly. So that was a point of view that I hadn't considered entirely. And I was very grateful to have that feedback. And, when I saw, that perspective, it allowed me to actually make the book a lot stronger.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And Donna has joined us from West Suffield, Connecticut. So we really love that we're getting people from across the country tonight. That's one of the things that we really pride ourselves on doing with these events. And I love seeing that Donna was not really a mystery reader. This is not really the genre that you usually read, yet you enjoyed it so much. And I love that you found it to be delightful and hopeful, despite there being a murder. And I thought that was really, really great because and you like the twist at the end. So I thought that was, those points were like really well brought up for somebody who doesn't usually read in this genre. So
I love the parallel of the Raphael, the one
Juan
in
Manuel?
the restaurant trying to frame Molly, and then Molly
Oh,
frames
Rodney.
him. I love
Yes,
that.
yes. Oh, thank you. Thank
like
you.
the twist was the best. It really, truly was. It became this really uplifting story as a result of like who is going to end up, winning in the whole situation. Really, really well done.
I wanted to play with that. I wanted to play with a world which is not like our world, where, justice doesn't always reign so supreme in our world, does it? And to have this little universe, this little hyper real universe where justice is meted out in ways that do not, adhere to the law, but are deeply satisfying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Donna, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate having you with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question from Lisa Nakich from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm interested to know if you had this personal experience with people on the autism spectrum, which you've talked about a little bit before, but if you could go a little bit more in depth on were there particular situations you were channeling into this book as well, things that had actually happened when you were out there with your students that you said, I think I can get that into play here, and it would, or take that kind of feeling and put it into this book.
That sense of a lack of belonging, of, so many times with my students, they were coming to work with me in school where I was working because they had been told that they didn't fit. They were misfits, that they didn't belong in a so-called regular school. They didn't belong in the public system. So they had to go elsewhere for an education. They came with this burden of being shunned, of being ostracized and outcast. And, it took them tremendous bravery, extraordinary courage just to take up space. And that's something I learned so much from watching. I learned so much from watching them preserve their dignity in such situations and saying, no, I exist in these subtle and profound ways. I deserve to be.
Yeah.
And it was that feeling, that discord of not feeling that you fit in, which we've all felt. We've all felt that in different ways for different reasons. It's a universal experience. But I wanted that to be sort of a drone note under everything in this novel, and for there to be a sense of resolve by the end, because those who don't fit in, those who aren't, maybe so cleaving to the norm, in the end, they find their community, they find their place. And it's the most beautiful community ever. I want to be part of it. If the reader feels like, oh my God, I want to be with them, then I've done my job right.
Exactly. In our town, we have a school down the street that is for children that are either on the spectrum or have all kinds of disabilities. And they actually have inside a store where they go practice going to the store, all different kinds of places you go to every day. And there's a place, a couple of, again, probably 10 miles away from here, called Lifetown. And they actually have places set up where the kids can go get their nails done and be in an environment where they can practice their social cueing, so that when they go into the real world, their cues are not off, so that they've known what has gone on before. So I just love experiences like that, because you do have to go out into the real world at this time, at some point. And it's cruel, and it can be really, really cruel. And the other thing that we haven't talked about is Molly's grandmother, who is somebody who plays off screen the entire time. We never actually get to see her, but what she's brought to Molly and what she's taught her is extraordinary for giving Molly who she is.
I hope so. I modeled Gran after not my own grandmother, but my mother, in fact, who died about, 8 years ago. She died. She did not go gently. She died of Alzheimer's. And I say that because I'm quoting Molly from the book. She died. And, you know, she was an extraordinary person, in some ways very much like Gran, in some ways very, very different. She was exuberant and loud in the life of the party, and I don't think Gran is that. But the thing they had in common was this ability to unconditionally love and protect those close to them, most especially their blood bonds. My mother was fierce like that. And so I wanted to give that quality to Gran and give that gift of a really strong, loyal matriarch to every reader who would pick up the book. In many ways, it was my ode to my mother, but also my ode to the wonderful women around us who hold us up, who keep us going, who protect us, who stand up for women, and who do what's right.
And and somebody's commenting in the chat right now. It's filled with nuggets of great life wisdoms that are precious. And that's exactly what comes through in the book. Is there are little things that happen. And when they happen, you just say, wow, I didn't really think about life like that. It gives you those moments of pause. And this is a slim novel. This is not one of those chock full kinds of books with lots of extra pages. And it's spare, but the words that come through from Graham, as far as, talking to everybody, or to everybody in a situation, to teach her that this is how you're going to behave with these people. I think it's extraordinary. And it just gives that book, from somebody that we never really meet, we feel like we really come to know her. Really.
That's lovely.
So Karen from New York City's got a question. Do you have a sketch or a photo of what Molly might look like? I found her appearance, especially her face and hair, hard to picture in my imagination. Something you did on purpose, or tell me what's going on?
So interesting, Karen. In some ways, you're right, because I wanted her to be a bit of a blank slate and for the reader to picture whatever they wanted. And there are many aspects of the book where I really play with those boundaries, giving you just enough, but not too much. Because I see my job as a writer is to start the picture, and your job as the reader is to finish it. And I do that with the setting. I never name the setting. I want you to finish it. I do that with the hotel. I say dark black hair, and that she wears it more or less shoulder length and a very straight bob. And that's how I picture her. I picture her having, a very sleek look, unpretentious, doesn't wear makeup, doesn't do a whole lot to change who she really is, because Molly is Molly. And she makes no qualms about who she is. She has more ability to accept herself than I do, that's for sure. And I'm highly, highly envious of her ability to just be, have that fidelity to who she truly is. I find that a remarkable quality in her, and one that I think I wrote into her because I envy it and admire it so much. So yeah, I think you're right. I was very spare in her looks. And your job, now that I've given you 2 or 3 details, is to bring her to life, complete the picture. And whatever you complete her looking like, you are right. Whatever she looks like, you are right. Whatever city you decide to set this novel in, because I never say where it is, you are also right. And I love it when readers come out to me and say, I know this is Boston. And I'm like, yeah. And the next person comes up and says, I am absolutely certain that this is, the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. That is this hotel. And I say, yes, it is. Because that to me is a great compliment, because it means that you're doing your work as a reader. You're filling in the blanks. You're bringing my world to life. You're completing the picture for me, because this is a partnership. This isn't just my book. When I write it, when I'm done it, it's your book. You finish it for me. I just started.
Well, it's interesting because Bobby from Loveland, Ohio, the next question that she gave me is, where does the story take place? Which is interesting. Coffee and donuts seem more typical of the United States than tea and crumpets. Olive Garden is a USA restaurant, but this might be typical of Toronto, where the author lives. And I was laughing because I have guessed that the hotel is the Fairmont Royal York, where the Queen used to stay, or the Ritz-Carlton in downtown of Toronto. So those were my 2 guesses. But now you're saying I could be at the Waldorf, I could be at the Plaza, I could be any place.
Well, I will say that I cannot help, be influenced by the hotels that I've been surrounded by in my own hometown for a long time. So you are not that far off, certainly. But I will also say this. There is another hotel called the King Edward Hotel in Toronto. And I've worked for 2 different publishing houses in the last, 15 years, Penguin Random House, and now I'm with Simon & Schuster. And they, for a long time, they were on the same street. And when I get off the subway, to this day, like when I went to work yesterday and went to the office, when I get off the subway, I pass the King Edward Hotel. And in the King Edward Hotel, there used to be, they're not anymore, but there used to be red carpets going up the stairs. And there was a doorman who wore a cap and a greatcoat. And every day that I passed him, I smiled at him and he tipped his hat at me. And I felt like, I know this man. Every day I passed him, it started to feel like he was looking out for me. And every time I passed that hotel, I felt a little bit safer knowing he was there. And, this is just one of those funny little nuggets from real life that you somehow repurpose, So for Molly, I wanted to give her Mr. Preston. And I'm telling you, Carol, when I passed that man, this older gentleman who works at that hotel and is the doorman, I can't help but see Mr. Preston. In my mind, I have converted reality into fiction, and the fiction has become more real to me than the truth. I feel like I know him.
You're making me laugh because there's when we used to work, when we had our office in the city, there was Universal Records was on this side street, and we used to walk past it every day. And I was parking in the parking lot going, and there was a man there every morning that I said hello to. I have no idea why he's there, why he is standing in front of this building. He wasn't wearing a doorman coat, nothing. So one day, this Jeep Rubicon jumps up on the sidewalk. All these people come out with long cameras. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on, but this man leaps into action and immediately is keeping everybody away. I'm like, so the next morning I said, I have to ask you, who are you and what was that? And he goes, that's the photographers. Kanye and Kim Kardashian were going into Universal Records. And when they were going in, the doormen tip off the people of where the car is going or the car services. So all the photographers convened. He goes, and this is what my job is, to not let them get into the building and let the people get in safely. And I was laughing so hard. I said, so that is your job all this time? He goes, yeah. And I have to make sure everybody's not packing. I said, packing what? He goes, well, a lot of times the rappers come in and we have to make sure the weapons are left outside. And then he hands me his card. He goes, if you ever need private security. And I was like, I can't believe this. This is like the craziest story. He goes, but I'd be happy to provide security for you. I've been seeing you for years. And I was like, I'm really okay. I really am all right.
Well, see, there you go. You have your own Mr. Preston who's been looking out for you all this time.
All that time. I was just for years saying hello and I have no idea what the person says. Bobby also is asking, does the author hint that the doorman is Molly's grandfather? How's that one?
I think the author might be hinting that, but like I say, I don't like to complete. I like to leave dangling threads and have the reader, make some assumptions. I will say I am working on my second book, and you will see a return of Molly, although the genre might change in some ways. There is a mystery element, but there is also another kind of genre going on because I'm a Frankensteiner. As I said, I like to mix 2 things together all the time. And I will say that there's more clarity around that very question in the next novel. It should be out in 2024.
See, it's like we're just, we're a little clairvoyant. This group is a little clairvoyant. I like that.
Well, it's a very clever reader who catches on to that, and I always appreciate it.
There you go, Bobby. You get that credit. So my question to you is, how good a bed maker are you? Like, do you make your bed like in the hotel? No.
I'm horrible, Carol. I'm so sorry. I'm in some ways I am like Molly. I'm a bit of an absolutist. I love justice. I'm that little kid who's like, it's not fair. I still cling to that. I've eaten the same thing for breakfast for the last 40 something years. And if I don't eat that for breakfast, I get a little hung up. But in other ways, I'm not like Molly. And I like a clean house, but I'm not obsessive about it. And the only good part about cleaning in my mind is when it is done.
Very, very true. Cleaning the pantry right now. It's amazing what we've managed to collect. How many jars of some things we have, seriously. I'm sharing a question from Diana Kim. Wait, we have to go back for 1 second. What is the breakfast every morning? Because I know that's going to come up in the Q&A. What is the breakfast?
Oh, it's really boring. Like I said, I have toast and coffee. So 2 pieces of toast, one with peanut butter, the other with jam every morning for 40 something years, for as long as I can remember.
There's a room service order, everybody. There's the room service order.
There it is.
Now I'm going to share a question from Diana Kimball from Ann Arbor, Michigan. She says, it was clear from your story that Molly was raised to work hard with special attention to cleaning rooms perfectly. She and Gran lived modestly and apparently honestly. There was no mention of her stealing anything from hotel guests throughout the book. Why then is it realistic for the reader to believe she takes and pawns Mr. Black's watch at the end of the story?
Well, I think my intention with Molly was to create a moral compass that is different from what our expectations. So, her moral compass is not the same as everyone else's. It's quite different. And as we learn at the end of the story, wow, it's more different than we ever could have imagined, right? And she makes various comments throughout the novel about her Robin Hood sense of justice, where those who are lesser thans deserve to take when they do not have another option. And the watch incident is one of those areas, or the ring incident is one of those areas where she finds a loophole, where she is so stuck in a corner and she cannot find another way out. And she chooses to steal from a man who is an unjust man. She would never steal from somebody who in her mind was a lesser than, who really struggled the way she struggles.
Yeah.
That is the way she justifies it in The World According to Molly.
World According to Molly is where we're at right now, folks. It's exactly the way she's thinking. Robin Freeman Getty from Alexandria, Virginia said she loved The Maid. It was sweet, sad, comical, and enlightening. That's a very good description. Although shocked when Molly used the pillow at her grand's dying, it was a brilliant device played out during the unraveling of Charles Black's murder. Have you been raised reading mystery, Columbo, and psychological novels? Is that where your true interest lies?
Well, as I said before, I'm an editor, so I read a lot of genre fiction. And yes, I do love mysteries. It's not the only genre I love. I actually love the best of every genre. And that can be literary, that can be a thriller, that can be a romance. If it's really, really good, and if it's character driven, that's usually where I like to live in terms of what I read,
So yeah, and it's interesting because if you read a good mystery or you read a good thriller, you are surprised at the end, but you also have to be surprised at a number of other points along the way. You can't just be surprised at the end. So
no, that's right. There has to be that driving engine of suspense and intrigue that is sort of a drone note in the background throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
And as for mysteries, I loved Columbo when I was a kid, and I remember, sitting around with my mother and watching Columbo. And my mother used to talk to the television, as one does, if you're my mother. And it used to drive her mental that Peter Falk was such, a disheveled mess all the time. So she loved the show. And I think she was not so secretly in love with Peter Falk. And she would yell at him and say, why did you not? My mom had a very French Canadian accent. Why did you not press your coat? Look at you, your hair a mess. Do you not own a brush? She would yell at the television screen. And there's something about that to me was quintessentially Molly and Gran. Mm-hmm. It was this ability to be together and to be so different and unique, and to find a love of one thing that really brought them together. And so I gave that little bit to them as well. Columbo.
Exactly. That little bit of he was always so sly and doing these things, and you weren't sure he was ever going to schlubbily get his way there. You're not really sure what's going to happen. Writing was brilliant there. It was really, really good. So Cindy Rosales joining us now from Florida. I'm not sure where. I think you just have to have to unmute yourself. I'm just seeing that coming. So welcome. I hope your weather is better than the hard rain we've got going on right now.
Much
So
better.
much better. Thank you. You were kind of cold last week though. And people
Yes,
are
it
talking down there
was.
said I'm looking for a down jacket. I was like, really? This is 45, Carol. It's really cold. Yeah.
Mhm. I felt badly for the people who came here for their vacation. They didn't get one.
I didn't get one. I didn't get one.
Yeah.
So
But
since
first
you
of
have
all,
questions. Yeah.
yeah, I would, Nita, I just want to congratulate you on such a successful novel, first of all.
Thanks, Cindy.
You know, and especially you coming from being an editor. How was it being on the other so-called side?
Oh, and they are different sides. You are right about that. It was so and remains discombobulating. You know, as an editor, I know what I'm doing. Like I'm a little bit cocky. I'm like, yeah, I know how to fix this. I know how to help the author. I know what I'm doing. And I wouldn't take on a manuscript if I didn't know how to help the author. Obviously, I would stay away from that one. And there's some other brilliant editor there who's going to be much more helpful to that author. But when it came to writing, it was like I suddenly had blinders on. I just felt so alone and lost, and I couldn't see the same way. You know, when I'm talking to writers about or anyone really, about the editor and writer relationship, I talk about the labyrinth. So it's just a little metaphor I use to explain the difference between a writer's job and an editor's job. So there's a labyrinth, there's this maze. And the writer is standing outside of the maze, and she's going to go in and she's going to write a story. That's her job. Her job is to go through the maze of the story, through all those cricks and turns and corners and the, dead ends, and get to the end of the story. But when she's down there, she can't see very much ahead, right? She can only see where she is and where her tunnel vision is. And I really felt that. When I'm an editor, I feel like I'm on a ladder outside of the labyrinth. I'm way up top and I'm looking down, and I can tell the writer, oh, honey, if you turn left on up there, you're going to get stuck in that dead end, and you will have wasted 6 months of writing time to go nowhere. So don't do that. Turn right and do this. Go here. Try this. Go here. I did not have that sensibility. I did not have the eyes from above when I was writing. And it was so strange, so disorienting to lack that vision when I'm so used to having it. And it's still something I'm getting used to. I still have to poise myself and go, oh my God, I don't quite know what I'm doing. I only know 3 things. And I have to trust that through intuition and through, the years of working in this industry, that these stepping stones are going to come up, and I'm going to know where to put my feet.
Kind of following up on that question, how was it to work with an editor, someone who was editing your work, your words?
It was a huge relief to me. I have no fears of the editorial process that way, because I know the difference that good editing can make to a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, bring it on. Give me editors, give me my eyes back, put them on that ladder and let them see for me, because I am lost. And it was great. So I had 3 editors, one in the UK, one in Canada, and one in the US. And they all it was really magical. It doesn't always go so well when there's a tripartite editing, but in my case, it went really, really well. And they all took care of different important pieces of the manuscript. And for me, that was the best of all worlds.
Yeah. Carol, do I get another one? Because I just wanted to ask,
Go for it.
any surprises, Nita? I mean, in the whole process for you? Any surprises?
Everything, that I have readers at all, that 418 participants are currently in that I'm here talking with you and Carol. What? This is crazy. To me, this is the biggest surprise of all. I don't think there are many writers, especially female ones, who go into this pursuit and go, oh, I'm going to be successful. People are going to read my book. It's going to be a bestseller. Oh, no, I didn't think that. No, I tortured myself thinking this is a piece of garbage. Why did I write this? I'm going to embarrass myself.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that happens is like a shocking surprise. That people engage with the character of Molly has been just so unbelievably wonderful and really meaningful for me. As I say, I really do think of the reader. I really do see this as a partnership. So to have you complete my book for me, it's meaningful. It's hugely important. It's the best gift that any creator could have.
It's wonderful.
Yes,
It's
beautiful. Thank you.
With that in mind, thanks, Cindy. With that in mind, do you feel that you changed the way you edit people? And also, do you have a favorite quote from your book? We'll do both. Have you changed?
Sure.
how you edit?
You know, I think I've become more sensitive. I don't think I was insensitive before, but there is that big difference between when you understand and feel compassion for someone and their situation, a situation you've never been in yourself, versus you know exactly what that feels like. It's a different thing.
Mhm.
And now I understand that. I understand where those nerves come from, how you know this authorial blindness can be so shaking to your confidence. I pillow my authors a little bit more. I'm more gentle around that stuff because I really do now understand it in a visceral way. Whereas I think before, certainly I understood it in some regards, emotionally and psychologically, but now I really understand the depth of what that feels like.
Mhm.
You know, I try to tread more lightly.
What does Linwood Barclay has a great line about getting author's notes. He says, it's like going to the doctor. Am I going to live or am I going to die? He said, when he gets the notes back, and sometimes you have to pour a drink first. So I find that a great line about what happens when you're getting your editor's notes.
Linwood's the best.
It's a great line. It's a great line. Paul from Old Town, Maine asks, is the author going to write a follow-up, which I think you've talked about, and or is he going to pursue the life of Molly as she progresses through another whodunit mystery that leads to Molly becoming an honorary detective awarded to her? So you are writing another book.
Not a bad idea, I would say. That's a great idea. Do you mind if I steal that? Yeah, I mean, yes, there is a return. There is going to be a return of Molly in a different style of book. Yes, there will be a mystery involved, but I'm not going to say too much about what that style is. But I will say we start to learn a lot more about Molly's future and how that relates specifically to her past with Gran.
That's going to be wonderful. Wonderful. Also, the last we heard, Florence Pugh is set to star in Universal's big screen adaptation of The Maid. Any news on the film adaptation? Any starting? Did you get a chair with your name on it yet? Where are we?
No chair with my name on it yet, I'm afraid. You know, things are moving along. The script is progressing really, really nicely, but I don't have any news I can share just yet. But gosh, I'm looking forward to saying something soon. Here's hoping.
There's fantastic. Well, this book has so much to talk about that we're going to move on to audience Q&A with Tom Donadio, our editorial director, sharing questions as the voice of God. This is always one of my favorite parts. So, Tom, do you have questions for us?
Yes, we have a lot of good questions here. So first question is from Kai, who asks, so many of the people in my book club really expected Molly to use her unique talents to become the quote unquote amateur detective in the story. Did you ever consider doing that? If so, what made you change your mind?
Well, I think in some ways she is. But the thing about Molly is that she misses some of the traditional clues that we would expect her to pick up, and the reader becomes the detective. So I was really trying to invert a trope there that is like one of the quintessential tropes of the mystery, the traditional mystery genre. Like if you think of Sherlock Holmes, he walks into a room and he sees everything. He sees everything that we don't see. He collects all the clues and then he reports back to us all the things that we as readers, as viewers missed. And with Molly, it's kind of the opposite. She walks into a room, she misses so many essential clues. The reader collects them. We as the readers think we know everything. And as it turns out, we don't. So you see, I'm playing with some of the tropes, some of the conventions of the genre to try and do something that a little bit outside of the norm.
Great. Tom, what's
Jose
next?
asks, Molly's character is very well created. Even though it's never mentioned in the story, her IQ must be quite high for the language, behavior, and special way to socialize with people, more like a Sheldon Cooper, but in a great book instead of a TV show. Sorry for the comparison. Were you trying to give a hidden message to your reading audience with Molly's behavior in the book?
I don't think it was hidden. I was just trying to portray a character that was incredibly clever and with a very unique. I'm an editor. I hear that, and I'm like, that's terrible. Why would you say that? With a unique point of view, and yes, a deep kind of intelligence that was, but her with a moral compass that was so outside of the scope of what we consider quote unquote normal. And it is that compass, I think, that drives the book and many of the twists that happen unexpectedly because of her sense of justice, which is so different from the sense of justice that we're taught by the law.
Mhm. Mhm.
Book Girl asks, did you spend any time hearing immigrant stories to define the dishwasher's character?
Yes, I did. As I said, I went to great lengths to talk with a sensitivity reader, and most definitely in my background, there are a few quintessential people who have studied immigrant maids, and that was valuable to me, and immigrant workers in hotels. So I do know someone who is a professor whose work was to really understand some of the impact of the hotel hierarchy on staff, particularly on immigrant staff, who may already have a sense of feeling, unsteady sense of belonging, of feeling outside of a sense of place. And for that being part of, the character of Juan Manuel, another struggle that he has to endure as he tries to do right and do well in this very difficult and challenging job where he is, of course, very much abused.
Mhm.
Eileen asks, I am curious about the isms that Molly's grandma used that helped Molly get through her life's challenges. For example, never mind what others think, it's what you think that matters. When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. There are so many in the book. They had a big impact on me as I read it.
Well, that's a really lovely comment. I struggled with those in some ways because I guess I was asking myself, can a character like Gran use these isms, use these cliches, and somehow reinvigorate them and give us a feeling of directionality, hope, our own moral compass, as she also gifts that to Molly. And that's what I was trying to do with that. I mean, Gran is trying to orienteer a young woman who really lacks direction in some ways. She's trying to give her a moral foundation. And she does this through these isms, through these little aphorisms that give Molly a sense of direction and a way to exist fairly and justly in the world. And she listens very carefully to what her grandmother says, and she lives by those rules.
Mhm. Very true. Like those rules you think about, oh, this is what you do. This is the way you behave. This is what happens.
Yes.
Tom, something else out there?
Yes. Sheila asks, Lauren Ambrose was amazing as the narrator for The Maid. Did you have a part in choosing her?
I did. There was a time where I listened to various actors performing the role of Molly in those auditions, and Lauren's voice, I remember the hairs on my arms just goosebumping, just standing on end as soon as I heard that voice. There's a catch in it. There's a tension. And I think she just did the most spectacular job of bringing such a difficult character to life. It would be easy to over egg that pudding, and she didn't. It felt so true and real, and there's a nice edge in that voice, and a beauty too, and an understanding of what it feels like and what it sounds like not to belong. So I think she did the most spectacular job, and I'm most grateful to her for bringing Molly's voice to life.
We have a question from Allie, who actually used to intern with us, so it's great to see you here, Allie. She asks, were there any types of media, books, movies, etc., that helped influence the mystery of your story? As a lover of all things thriller and crime, I haven't consumed any type of story like The Maid before. I absolutely adored it.
Oh, that's very kind. Well, I would say on my mental mood board, I had a few things pinned. Certainly Agatha Christie and that sort of traditional classical mystery novel, the locked room sort of novel that this hotel offers. That was something that was, I wanted to create my own version of that in a contemporary way. And the film Knives Out, which when I was starting this book had just come out. So that was something too. I wanted to create larger than life characters, not real ones, but hyper real ones, heightened ones, almost Wes Anderson-like, that was bigger than life, but I wanted them to be invested with real human emotions, and grow beyond the archetype of the cliched character they were at the beginning into people we really felt for and believed by the end of the novel. And then I think the last thing I would say is that there was a novel that was really important to me by Gail Honeyman called Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. And I'm gonna guess that many of you out there have read it. And, this was an important novel in the publishing industry because it really defined a certain kind of fiction, what the Brits call uplifting literature. It was one of the first books to have that moniker, and what the Americans call feel-good fiction. It's the kind of story which is a first-person lens from a unique point of view, and a character who is stunted, who grows through a journey from the beginning to the end of the novel. That book was really formative to me. And the main character was a really prickly cactus kind of character. And, I think Gail Honeyman performed just the most wonderful magic trick, because this prickly, difficult, unlovable character, you cannot help but love. And that fascinates me. That journey of a writer going from creating a cactus to a lovable one is something that utterly fascinates me. I think Frederick Bachman does that really, really well in A Man Called Ove, for instance. And I think Gail Honeyman did it beautifully there. And I wanted to see if I could find a way to do that myself.
Mhm.
Well, Nita, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because Terry says, Molly reminded me of another character, Eleanor Oliphant. Thank you for shining such a warm and caring light on her uniqueness. We need more books about characters with that kind of depth and spirit.
Mhm.
So Terry
Yay,
definitely
thank
picked
you.
up on that.
Thank you very much.
Just getting back to the writing process a little bit, Joan asks, did your editor recommend any drastic changes to your draft or just small tweaks? How did you receive these recommendations?
I wouldn't say that we did a lot of, massive plot changes. It was more about extending the arcs, making sure that the volumes were right on things. So, did I describe the hotel enough for the reader to complete the picture, or did I need to add more? Was Molly's journey and all the little twists and turns refined enough? Were the clues that I was putting down, all those little breadcrumbs, adding up to enough for the reader to really be intrigued? It was those small details, which seem small on the surface, but when you really do refine them one by one, they make such a difference, draft to draft to draft.
Mhm.
Kate asks, what is your favorite quote from the book?
Mm.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I think Carol asked me that before and I never answered. I would say that the end quote is the one that I wrote towards. I always knew that was where I was heading. But Carol, you can read it for me.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is my favorite quote. And I've told you I have this framed on my wall. This frame's on the wall. I should bring that frame over. Wait a second. Okay. The longer you live, the more you learn. People are a mystery that can never be solved. Life has a way of sorting itself out. Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And I remember reading that and saying, I have that frame, that last line, everything will be okay at the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end, up on my wall. And I was like, how did you? So yes, I absolutely love that quote. Should send you something framed.
Oh, well, I think it's wonderful you have it on your wall. And in many ways, that was a driving force for me to complete the novel, because I knew that ending. I knew that that's where I was going, but I had no idea how I was going to get there. How I was going to earn the right to put those words down on the page, you know?
It just grew up as a quick aside to our readers. That was done for me by my sister when we were in the years of building the book report. And I said, I don't know if it's the end. I don't know if we've gone where we're going to go or what, because there's always tough times. When you're a small company, it's always tough times. And I sat there and I said, and she sent me that like framed. And I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. So
Oh, that's so lovely.
In terms of the company as well here.
Oh, that's lovely. And it's not the end. It's just
Not
the beginning.
yet. Just the beginning, keeping on going. I've done so many different things in between. Tom, anything else?
Yes. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee who asks, is Molly neurodiverse? I picked up your book for that reason. The description made me think of myself. I wondered if she was.
I think that that's something that I want you to decide for yourself. As I said earlier, you know, something that was more important to me than a label, putting a label on Molly, was having the reader sit behind her eyes, you know, to live as her, to work as her, to think as her. And my hope is that if you live that experience, you come to love her and to come to have some understanding and compassion for her unique point of view in the world. I think that's more important than asserting any kind of label on her neurodiversity or lack thereof. She's many things. She is not just one thing. And moreover, she's you know, a unique person with a worldview that deserves to be understood, respected. And you know, she goes about the world, goes about her place in the world, experiencing grave, horrible prejudice. And I wanted the reader to think about that and think about their own interactions in the world with all kinds of people, whether they be neurodiverse or not.
Another anonymous question. You wrote that Molly loved to eat at the Olive Garden with her granny. Is there someone in your life who really enjoyed eating at the Olive Garden?
Who's asking that question? I think I might know who that is.
It's an anonymous question.
That is hilarious. Okay, I have this friend, okay, and she is obsessed with the Olive Garden. And when you are writing on your own and you don't want to tell anyone because you're worried that your novel sucks, you leave these little Easter eggs in your book for yourself and only for yourself. And the Olive Garden is one of those Easter eggs. It was my sort of, you know, hearty har little laugh to my friend who is obsessed with the Olive Garden, and I am not so obsessed with it. I wrote that into the book as a way to entertain myself. So some clever reader out there has figured that out.
Well, yeah, it's really funny because a lot of groups said now we need to go meet at the Olive Garden, only to be beaten by somebody I know who used to call it the Olive Garden. And I was like,
oh my goodness.
Olive Garden. It sounds like we need to go to the Olive Garden. You know?
That sounds so fancy, so refined.
Not the Olive Garden, the Olive Garden for the breadsticks. Yeah.
Let's see. Gail asks, what are you currently reading that has captured your imagination?
Oh, well, me and the rest of the world are reading the same thing right now. It's a book called Spare. Maybe you've heard of it. I think 1.4 million people bought it last week. So that is what I'm reading, in all honesty. And I must say, I'm really loving it. I think it's a beautifully executed memoir. And I think something that really fascinates me are ghostwriters. Yes. Who work with you know, clients and bring their stories to life. And I think this one is incredibly well wrought. It's challenging. And yes, everybody is going to have different opinions on Harry the Spare. But as a study of the memoir genre and what it can accomplish,
Yeah.
great.
I feel
Loving
Joe
it.
Moninger did a great job. Joe Moninger, who was the ghostwriter, and he did Andre Agassi's book. He's done his
Yep.
own book with the Tender Bar. And actually, Harry talking on television is not as good as the way Joe has got this book done. And it makes such a difference because I'm reading it and it's got more heart and soul in it than when he is just talking on television, like pull the string. And it was very interesting because I found it very sad at the beginning. I had to put it down because it was very, very
It is
sad.
sad.
Everything he's went through.
Deeply
But
sad.
really, really sad. But the way the writing was flowing through the whole thing, I was like, okay, put him on television or tell him what to say because it'll be a lot better. Seriously.
Yeah, no, that sort of channeling is just that chameleon ability to channel a voice like that. It is incredible. And he is one of the best
Yeah.
ghostwriters in the world. Sarah Corbett is another one. It's just amazing.
I'll pick it up for him. I'll pick it up for him to see what he's done.
Yes,
Honestly,
yes.
that's why I want to read the book.
that's why I read it. That's why I'm reading it. and it delivered.
It delivers completely.
Yeah.
By the way, Karen says our book club is going to the Olive Garden. So,
Oh, that's so cool.
so maybe
I love
more
that.
book clubs will be showing up. at
Please
the Olive
send
Garden.
me photos. I love it when book clubs send me photos of the amazing things they create around the book, or places they go that are themed. It blows my mind.
So much fun.
Have fun. Or the Olive Garden, as we like to
It's the
call it.
Olive Garden. Yes. The breadsticks at the Olive Garden. Tom, anything else? Close?
Yeah, I think we might be able to close on this. Anna says, amazing debut book. How are you handling the fame of having the best thriller book of 2022 on Goodreads? I voted for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Goodreads voters. Fame. I'm not very famous. That's the wonderful thing about being a writer is you can preserve your anonymity, and you need it in order to write because you're always out in the world stealing things, stealing experiences, listening to dialogue, observing, and bringing, those little tidbits, those little flashes of life that I've illuminated, I hope, some of them today, into your novel, and turning fact finally into fiction. So my life is completely changeless in the most wonderful ways. I'm exactly the same, and with the same struggles I've always had, but delighted to have something new, and that is readers to share this experience with.
Yeah, and so well deserved. So well. Okay, it's the third time I've had a conversation with you, and I've learned something from every single one, and that's really saying something about you, and also saying
No,
something
it says
about the
something
audience.
about the interviewer, Carol, because
Well,
it's
the
an art
audience-
form too.
We have an amazing audience here. We have an amazing audience, and I love that even those who wouldn't appear on camera. I know, like you didn't want to do this. We're going to get to in a second who our next guest is going to be, but guys. This is a very, very special evening, and I'm so glad you joined us. I'm so glad, Nita, you got to be a part of it. We've talked about this, and I said, oh, come on, I really want you to be able to do this. And it worked out at exactly the right time with the paperback coming out and hitting the Times list yet again this week, which is huge in Colleen Hoover world, the Colleen Hoover list.
I can't believe it. I honestly cannot believe I am on that list. Kudos to Penguin Random House. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, but it's also because people were looking forward to reading the book, and that says something about you. So we look forward to what you write next. And then when you write that, we want you to come back because clearly you've got a lot of fans here.
Don't worry, I'll be back.
You have a lot of fans here. It's clear that you've got a lot of fans. So thanks so much for joining us. And I'm going to get then to what we're going to have coming up for 2 events in February. So, Greg, can you share the screen of the event? This is like, oh, Greg, I love this. Okay, our next Bookaccino live event, the one that we do in the afternoon, where we preview books that are coming out. Like last January, when we previewed that The Maid was going to be out, and this January, when we told you that was coming out in paperback. Yes, that event. The next one will be on February 8th at 2:00 in the afternoon. And we're going to talk about books that are coming out from February 7th to February 28th, and a peek ahead at March and April, because Tom Donadio has figured out these short months and why we need to go ahead a month to be talking, because we're not getting into March quite the way we should, because February is a short month. There you go. So folks, that's what we'll be doing at February 8th at 2:00 in the afternoon. Sign up is available right now on bookreporter.com. And our next Bookaccino Live book group event, the next slide, will take place on Wednesday, February 22nd at 8 p.m. And our guest will be Fiona Davis, and we will be discussing her novel, The Magnolia Palace, which is now available in paperback. It's also a contest book over on readinggroupguides.com. Registration with this event will be available tomorrow on Book Reporter and Reading Group Guides websites. And we'll do the same kind of format. If you want to submit questions in advance, feel free to shoot them at me. If you want to be a panelist, you'll let me know. We'll be doing that. A quick reminder that we will be making this evening's talk available on YouTube and podcast. And it will probably be next week, and we'll alert everyone who was signed up as soon as that's live. And remember, we have 150 Book Reporter Talks to interviews available on YouTube channel, including another interview I did with Nita, where we talked about a lot of different things than we brought up tonight. So if you really love this book and you want to explore it also with your book club in a different way, if they were here with you tonight, think about that. Our channel is the Book Report Network, or wherever you listen to podcasts, look for Book Reporter Talks to. And to stay on top of what we're doing for any of our events, and we seem to do a lot of them, sign up for a Book Reporter newsletter so you never miss an event. So to everyone for joining us, to Nita, our whole audience tonight, thank you so much for being part of what was a very special evening for all of us, our first Bookaccino Live book group of the year. Thanks so much, everyone.